to tell you, please, first of all, it's Hanukkah, so you should have a bit of a donut or something. It would be a pleasure. I'll have something later. But in the meantime, please take a something and enjoy. I want to speak to you about the symbol of Israel. When we talk about Hanukkah, the word Hanukkah itself means dedication. And we have a special psalm for that. Mizmor Hanukkah Sabayis LeDavid, and that's our Hanukkah psalm, which is for the dedication of the temple. Now, it is so symbolic that it became very, very important for the tabernacle in the desert. First of all, it was originally when Moshe Rabbeinu received the instructions, the details, which is in Gemara, it's in the book of Exodus, elaborated in detail. Bezalel, the son of Uri, he's of the tribe of Judah. He was obviously a great artist. He had an assistant too in Aholiab of the tribe of Dan. But Bezalel, he was able to make this particular instrument called a menorah out of one piece of solid gold. Moshe, well, he didn't, the Gemara explains that he doesn't really understand what it was, what is this menorah. So the Almighty showed him in a vision what the menorah is, and it was done, of course, the Midrash explains that it was done in the form of fire. He saw a fiery menorah, because it is something which depicts hislavus, which means the emotional fire within a person for triumph, for success, to overcome the difficulties and sufferings. And this menorah was was the light, to give light to Israel. The Gemara says that the people say, God, how could God, who is light and the storer of light, give light to the Jewish people? You are light, God is light. So the Almighty, in his reply, it says, this is light to enable you, and it's your duty to be the light of nations, that you should utilize the light that I've given to you, which is of course Torah, in order that you should be a model for all the nations of the world. This was the main thrust of the lesson of Hanukkah, because in Hanukkah there was the revolution that took place was a miracle in itself. We talk about the miracle of the oil. You all know that story, how it became, when eventually Yehuda Maccabee, when he comes into the temple and finds only a pach shemen, a cruse of oil with the high priest's stamp on it. So normally it would only last for one day, and it takes 8 days to make new oil, for the purposes of the continuing lamp. So in that case, it was a miracle that the little bit of oil should not only last for 8 days, but every day it grew even brighter. But when you look at this from another point of view, you say the real miracle is, as we say it in the Al-Hadissim, it's Rabbi Biad Miatim. It says the big armies of Antiochus, the Seleucidian army, the Syrio-Greeks, the vast army was conquered by the few who were the Maccabeans of the house of Hasmon, the Hasmonean household, the priestly household, and they overcame them. Rabbim Be'ad Miatim. And then we say the Shomiat Tzadikim, these wicked ones, were overcome by the righteous ones. And the Zaydim, these presumptuous people who were idolaters, they were overcome by the Osakei Sorasecha, the ones who observe our Torah. So you see, the real miracle you can understand is when you see a small group of people overcoming a vast army that came to destroy you. And this was the greatness of the light that came to them at the time of the Maccabeans. The original the original menorah, which was made by Bezalel, that was in the temple, first of all the tabernacle in the desert, and in the temple of Solomon. But you see, when all these revolutions took place, and in Rome especially, when we had, you see, a source of this is Josephus, and Josephus explains three reasons of what happened to that menorah. First of all, we do know that from the relief on the Arch of Titus in the Roman Forum, and I've seen it myself, you can see that amongst the accoutrements and the appurtenances of the Holy Temple, the treasures of the Holy Temple, you can see this menorah which was carried by these Jewish slaves. Now the interesting thing is that that we know went to Rome. But also we know that from the Solomonic Temple, that was Herodian of course, but from the Solomonic Temple that must have gone by with the Babylonians. So they must have taken it to Carthage, or wherever they take it to Babylon, and they just disappeared. But the thing is that it's interesting to know that Pompey, for example, when he attacked Jerusalem in 63 of the Common Era, so that he didn't touch the spoils of the temple, Pompey. Crassus, it was in his time that you had Vespasian, who was the general, and Titus, his son, who took over when Vespasian became emperor, and ultimately all these treasures were taken away. Some of them went to Carthage, others went to Rome, and there are interesting evidence. For example, Josephus mentions that in the temple of Vespasian there are already many of these accoutrements. That's what he said. So it shows you that the Romans took a lot of these, like the table of showbread, for example, and lampstands. We're also told that one of the priests, Yeshua ben Tabutia, his name was, and he gave two like lampstands which were in the temple, and they were exactly made for the temple, and he gave them and handed them over to Vespasian. Others say that Vespasian took a lot of these amongst the promiscuous heap of other treasures from all sorts of areas where he conquered lands, and amongst them was a lot of the spoils of the temple also. In the Dead Sea Scrolls, there is one of the scrolls which it really does list many of these treasures that we had. Originally they thought it was a Lamech scroll. They thought it was a scroll dealing with Lamech, who was the father of Noach. But you see, later they realized, once they found a very good, he was a restorer of old paintings, a man called Arthur Biberkraut. It was a copper scroll. It was so difficult to unravel that the moment you touched it, it would crumble. But he was able to rescue something like 10 or 11 folios, and it listed a lot of the temple treasures. We call it the Genesis Apocryphon. And it's important to know that these lists are in existence, and but at the same time there was nothing left of the temple or the temple precincts to allow us to find anything. How do we know that, for example, the Torah was preserved? Because we do know that from a tradition that underneath the Sanctum Sanctorum, the Kodesh Kodashim, the Devir, we call it the oracle, which only the high priest was allowed to go in there once a year on Yom Kippur. And that underneath, buried right underneath, was a palimpsest of the Torah, you see. But the Aron itself, that's gone, you see. We don't know. All right, I mean, I'm not talking about these films with how it's supposed to name. Harrison Ford and all that. That's all baloney. But the thing is that people want to find the Noah's Ark. They're going to find the Noah's Ark. You see, people live in dreamland. And people, as a result, they come out with books which is nicht gestiegen and nicht geflogen, if you understand what that means in Yiddish. I can't translate it properly in between, but I think you have the feeling. Most important of all is the fact that the menorah, you see, still remained as the greatest symbol. And I found one in Jericho. Probably one of the oldest in Israel is in Jericho. But you'll find in 157 of the Common Era there was one that was discovered in Syria, in Europos. There was a shul which the mosaics all contain that. Then there are lampstands which contain the menorah, you know, the candelabrum. We also find it on clay tablets. It's even on gravestones. You'll find it in the Roman catacombs. And it became such a strong influential symbol that right up today, to the time of the State of Israel, when it was established, that it became the icon and the coat of arms of the new State of Israel in 1948. Because it is no doubt about it, the menorah is really the symbol. That is our icon. That's our flag. It's everything. Now, why the Magen David had gained such prominence in Jewish life, as you can see, to the extent that the Goyim used it as badges of shame for the Jewish people, I think it's really a reaction to that dreadful, emotional, and disgusting episode of Pope Innocent III in the 13th century and others, that had made the Jews go in different garb so that they should be picked out and also spat upon and you know and given, you know, to be made with great humility, you know, humbleness, and to give them such a way of life that it was so hard for them to live in Canton. I can only tell you that a reaction to that is that now we have raised it as our flag of freedom. So I think that what we have to understand is that the Magen David is the symbol of freedom and statehood. But the real object of the nation Israel, more perhaps even than the state of Israel, but the whole concept of Israel as a nation comes with this menorah. And it's out of the menorah that we have the Ner Tommy today. The constant, eternal light in the shuls, which reminds us of those days. When in the Torah it says, when you lift up the lights, Halosecha is Haneros, it's in the center of Halosecha in the book of Numbers, and the priest had the opportunity every day of lighting that. And it became ultimately the Ner Tommy. So now we always have the eternal lamp, and that's the way in which we govern ourselves with the spirit of light. So we say, because in the book of Proverbs, Kinei mitzvah, that the candle is a mitzvah and the Torah is light. All the mitzvahs that come together create that light. And when you look at the architecture of that menorah, it's interesting to know that the central shaft on a pedestal has 3 branches, all leaning towards the central shaft. So when you have the candles moving all towards the central shaft, you have one blaze of light. And that was the whole concept. The idea is that the Jewish nation will be the model of this projection of light for the benefit of the world as a civilized policy for the benefit of all people. And it was also in a way, I won't say natural, but the same miracle, if you like, that it was in the shape of a tree of life. Because really what happens is that menorah is really an Eitz Chaim, which was in the Garden of Eden. You know, there were 2 trees which we were warned against, mentioned in the book of Genesis. Eitz HaChaim the tree of life, and no one is to go near it. And for that reason, there's a cherev aniyas apachas. There's a sword, a revolving sword, which goes around that, because no one should start dabbling with cloning life in the sense that people may have in mind today, and people, and who knows what it can lead to. But that tree of life, we say, Eitz Chaim hi lamachazikim ba. So the tree of life became the tree of light. And the important thing is that the 7, which was the mystic figure, which started with creation. After all, the world was created with 7 days. Who's to say that it could have been 5, could have been 20, who knows? But it became 7. 7 is our mystical number. And became Shabbos 7th. 7 times 7 for the Jubilee. 7th year for the Shemitah. All in 7s. But when it comes to Yehuda HaMaccabee, when he walked into the temple after the destruction and cleansed the temple, a Medrash first of all says that there were 8 shpudim. You know what a shpud is? A shpud is a kind of a container on a spear. And for that reason, 8, it became the number of days from which they put in the oil. Others say it was really 7 days. The first one you can't count because that was the time when you proclaimed the day of the miracle, so there were 7 days after that, making 8 altogether. And you only look upon this as a symbol of the victory of Yehuda Maccabee and also the triumph over the Syrio-Greeks who were our enemies at the time. But and women are in it because Judith and Holofernes was the general, one of the generals of the of Epiphanes, Antiochus Epiphanes in the year 167. And what happens in that case is that Holofernes, he was a person who wanted to try out every bride before they got married. So Judith, she was a clever woman. She gives him plenty to eat and plenty to drink, gets him drunk, and then cuts off his head. Well, so women have also got a very important part to play in Hanukkah. And that's why if there's no man, a woman lights the candles. But also, whilst the candles are lit, you don't utilize the candles which are lit, except the fact that we have a shamus, an extra one, in case you are doing something wrong. If you are reading a book under the light of the lamp, so at least the shamus will be the one which will help you to overcome the prohibition of not utilizing these lamps, but only looking upon them and seeing the image and the stories which are in each of these lamps regarding the Jewish people. So you see, but let me tell you a little bit about that menorah. First of all, they had no gold as such, so they made it out of tin and wood. In the beginning, it was a wooden menorah, and afterwards, when they became much more of a state, and as you see in the coins, you've got coins of the state. That was the second Jewish Commonwealth. You got the opportunity of more metal industries and so on. So they were able to coat it with silver, and then finally they coated it with gold. So that menorah of the time of the Maccabees became the symbol of the Hanukkah which we have now, and it was also a very, very important period because, again, as I explained from the very outset, the fact that you have only a few people, and the same thing applies to Israel. You look at Israel today; it's a little country, but we've got Baruch Hashem, we've got an army, a Mossad, that can overcome some of these bigger people, bigger nations, in a manner which is to bring a reflection of great glory to us. So what do I say to you? The origins of the resource material lies in the Bible and in Josephus, and it's Josephus that we have to look for very, very many of the stories that we find in the history of our people. But the lamps which we have now are based, as you know, on the original. So there'll always be a menorah of, really, you see, with a central shaft, but to try to understand that the lights, they all moved in towards that central shaft. So there was one blazing light which originally projected the light to all the people of the world in a manner which we feel and hope will bring about a greater sense of illumination of the darkness that we have, which unfortunately is casting a big shadow over all of us. I don't think you understand, perhaps, but just now I'm reading that Ahmadinejad has already beginning to put the badge back onto the Jewish people in Iran. He's thinking of that, to legislate that every Jew and non-Jew, non-Muslim shall have to put a badge on them to indicate that mark of identification of calumny. Now that's the present going back to the beginning. And this man is a hazard, and the appeasement policy, in my opinion, will never work and will lead eventually to a Third World War. I'm hoping that it does not exist, but that's my opinion, that there will be a Third World War. The fact is that he's making 10 new reactors, and we are already learning that the richness of the technology, which is obviously coming from Russia and possibly from North Korea also, is enabling him ultimately to make weaponry. And it has been reported by a scientist that what they are doing in one particular instance is not for, it cannot be for industrial work, but it's definitely for weaponry. This is going on all the time. So I must tell you, the whole situation is not very, very good. So now we have, as I say, Baruch Hashem, we have Hanukkah, and I wish you all a Hanukkah Sameach. God should bless you all with the lights of Hanukkah, and we should all meet together in Simcha and Sosa, in joy, and let us hope that in Israel we'll have peace and quiet, and let's hope the new year, in 2010, that we'll begin, please God, on January the 13th will be our next shiur, that we will be able to say at least, Baruch Hashem, there hasn't been any tzaras during the so-called festive season, and that we'll be able to have a good year. I wish you all the very best. Hanukkah Sameach, and thank you again for your gracious greetings. And while there's a yahrzeit for Percy's mother, I'm going to say Kemal Rachman, and he will recite Kaddish for us.